One of the strongest armies Europe had ever seen threatened to breach Vienna's gates in September 1683. With tens of thousands of soldiers, the Ottoman Empire pushed into Central Europe in an attempt to increase its territory. A group of European warriors, under the command of the great Polish king John III Sobieski, moved to defend the city in the face of crushing odds. The future of a continent was at stake in this tale of bravery, cunning, and bravery, where the battles of Vienna served as the backdrop for a titanic battle. The summer of 1683 was marked by unease across Central Europe. Whispers of war spread faster than caravans, and merchants along the Danube spoke of a great host assembling under the Sultan's banner. By June, there could be no doubt. The Ottoman Empire had set its sights on Vienna once more. Kara Mustafa Pasha's army was unlike any Europe had seen in a century. Numbering perhaps 150,000 soldiers, the host was a vast and diverse force. Janissaries, the Sultan's elite infantry, marched with the discipline of veterans. Sipahi cavalry clad in glittering armor rode alongside fierce Tartar horsemen from the steppes, their reputation for cruelty striking terror ahead of them. Siege engineers brought artillery, sappers, and wagons stacked with timber. From the Balkans, the army rolled like a tide, unstoppable in its advance. Cities that resisted were razed. Those that surrendered were spared but forced to supply men and provisions. Vienna, the capital of the Habsburgs, was no ordinary city. It was a fortress surrounded by thick walls and bastions. Yet inside, its defenses were stretched thin. Emperor Leopold I, fearing capture, abandoned the city on July 7th, fleeing west to Linz. Many nobles followed, leaving Vienna in the hands of a garrison of barely 15,000 soldiers and a citizen militia of around 5,000. Command of the defense fell to Count Ernst Rudiger von Starhemberg, a man of iron will. Only 36 years old, he faced a colossal task: hold out against the mightiest army in the world until help could arrive. Reinforcements from the Holy Roman Empire and Poland were promised, but no one knew if they would come in time. On July 14, 1683, the Ottoman vanguard appeared before Vienna. By July 17th, the city was surrounded. The crescent banners lined the hills, and the siege began in earnest. Ottoman tents stretched for miles, turning the plains into a city of silk and canvas. At its center stood the luxurious pavilion of Kara Mustafa himself, a palace of red and green adorned with fountains and carpets. Kara Mustafa was confident. He believed Vienna would fall swiftly, not by storming its walls, but by starvation and fear. His army dug trenches and set up artillery, pounding the bastions day and night. Miners tunneled under the walls, planting explosives to shatter the defenses. Life in Vienna became a struggle for survival. Food grew scarce as weeks passed. Bread was rationed, and water from the Danube was cut off. Disease spread in the cramped quarters where civilians huddled in churches and cellars during bombardments. Yet morale, under Starhemberg's command, held firm. He inspired soldiers and civilians alike, declaring that Vienna would never surrender. For nearly 2 months, the city endured. The Ottomans launched wave after wave of attacks, blasting holes in the walls only to be repelled by desperate defenders. On several occasions, mines detonated, sending towers and bastions crumbling. Yet every breach was filled with rubble, timber, and flesh as the Viennese fought to plug the gaps. But across Europe, the cry for help had been heard. Emperor Leopold I sent desperate appeals to princes and kings. The first voice to answer was Pope Innocent XI, who proclaimed that the defense of Vienna was the defense of Europe itself. Through diplomacy and persuasion, he pushed for the creation of the Holy League. His greatest triumph was convincing Polish King John III Sobieski to commit his armies to Vienna's salvation. Sobieski was no ordinary monarch. A veteran commander, he had already won fame for defeating Ottoman forces. When the call for aid reached Poland, Sobieski did not hesitate. "To save Vienna is to save Poland," he declared. "If the enemy takes this city, they will take Krakow, then Warsaw. Better to meet them there than on our own soil." The Holy League was fragile, a coalition of necessity. Alongside Sobieski's Polish army came contingents from Bavaria, Saxony, and other German states. By September 10th, Sobieski's army, numbering around 70,000 men, had crossed the Danube and climbed into the hills overlooking Vienna. The stage was set. At dawn on September 12, 1683, the hills surrounding Vienna stirred with life. Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa commanded perhaps 120,000 troops. He believed his army could both contain Vienna and repel the newcomers, but he underestimated both the determination of Vienna's defenders and the ferocity of the Polish king. High on the Kahlenberg ridge, King Sobieski surveyed the scene. Below him, the plains stretched to the city walls, dominated by the Ottoman camp. He knew that time was short, but patience was crucial. That morning, Sobieski rallied his commanders. "Today, we fight not for crowns, nor for territories, but for our faith, our families, and the survival of Europe." The Allied forces stretched in a wide line, nearly 70,000 strong. On the left flank stood imperial troops under Charles of Lorraine. In the center, German contingents advanced through the forests. On the right flank, hidden among the hills, Sobieski massed his 20,000 Polish cavalry, waiting for the decisive strike. By midday, the clash was in full fury. Cannon thundered from both sides, smoke rising in choking clouds. Muskets cracked in volleys, while swords and axes clashed in brutal melee. Vienna's defenders launched desperate sorties against the Ottoman siege lines. The battle stretched into the afternoon, with the Allies pressing slowly but steadily. As the sun began to sink, Sobieski saw his chance. The Ottoman lines had begun to waver. He turned to his Polish hussars, the legendary winged cavalry, their armor gleaming, great feathered wings rising from their saddles. Nearly 20,000 horsemen stood ready. Sobieski lifted his sword and shouted, "In the name of God and the Blessed Virgin, charge for Vienna, charge for Poland, charge for Christendom." The trumpets sounded, the earth shook. The thunder of hooves echoed across the valley as cavalry surged forward. Dust rose in great clouds, sunlight flashing off armor and lances as the horde of horsemen poured down from Kahlenberg. At their head, Sobieski spurred his horse to full gallop, his standard raised high. When the hussars crashed into the Ottoman ranks, it was like a thunderbolt from the sky. The sheer weight and momentum of the charge smashed through Ottoman lines. Sipahi cavalry buckled under the impact, scattered like leaves in a storm. Infantry formations crumbled, their ranks torn apart by lance and saber. Sobieski cut straight toward Kara Mustafa's command post. The Grand Vizier fled in haste, his army collapsing around him. What had begun as a siege of triumph ended in a rout. From the city walls, Vienna's defenders watched in awe as the winged horsemen stormed through the Ottoman camp, enemies scattering in terror. As dusk fell, the once mighty Ottoman army was in full retreat, abandoning cannons, tents, and supplies in desperate flight eastward. Kara Mustafa's grand gamble had failed. The gateway to Europe remained closed. The victory at Vienna was complete. The largest cavalry charge in European history had decided the fate of a continent. Church bells rang across the city as King Sobieski rode through cheering streets. The Polish hussars became legendary figures, their fearless charge immortalized in memory and art. The echoes of Vienna's battle resonated far beyond the city walls, becoming a turning point that shaped European history for decades.